3 at Pauley Pavilion. Juju Watkins and USC's women's basketball team are home tonight against Arizona, 6 p.m. tip-off. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough. 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 If we care enough.
1, 2, 3, go! Ha ha! I'm gonna try to keep it coming. Things ain't always smooth, but I'll be alright as long as I can find the groove. Yes, I will. Yeah. Somehow I know that I can make it. You seem to like my style. All right. Don't you worry, I'm gonna be around a while. Yes, I will. I'm just happy to see you talk to me back in style again. Oh.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley. You get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit thetavissmileyshow.com. That's thetavissmileyshow.com, or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast version of this program at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, a conversation with the John Jay College psychology professor Matthew Barry Johnson about wrongful conviction, more specifically about how psychology informs due process in America. Professor Johnson, whose research focuses on the areas of interrogation, confession, and wrongful conviction, has discovered, get this, that suspects may understand their Miranda rights, but also doubt that police will actually honor those rights when arrested. Look forward to that dialogue in hour 2. In our third hour, we'll talk SCOTUS and other Trump-Biden legal matters with attorney Elizabeth Booker. The Supreme Court seemed skeptical of arguments to kick Donald Trump off of state ballots. Justices across the ideological spectrum questioned several aspects of a ruling from the Colorado Supreme Court. And today is the deadline for Donald Trump to appeal a federal appellate court's ruling that he does not have immunity from prosecution for his role in the January 6th insurrection. So a lot to talk about with attorney Elizabeth Booker in hour 3. But in this first hour today, let's talk politics with the national correspondent for New York Magazine, Gabriel Debinetti. Gabriel is also author of the book, The Long Alliance, The Imperfect Union of Joe Biden and Barack Obama. Gabriel, good to have you on the program. How are you today, sir?
It is a pleasure to be here. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor to have you on. Thank you for your time. Let me go back before I go forward. As I mentioned a moment ago, in a later part of our show today, we'll be talking about the Supreme Court and the two issues that are in front of it. Let me just get your take right quick on those two issues. You saw what everybody else saw last week. The court seemed skeptical of these arguments that Donald Trump should, in fact, be kicked off ballots in Colorado, Maine, and other places. Is that your read of what you saw?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It does seem that whatever the merits, the legal arguments, it seems entirely likely, based solely on the questions that the justices were asking during the discussion last week. It seems likely that they're going to rule, and of course we don't know, but it seems likely, against the idea that Trump can be removed from a ballot. One thing that it seems a lot of folks we're concerned about is the idea that states have the ability to essentially determine on their own who should be on the presidential ballot. That, it's not up to every single state, because, of course, if it were, it's a slippery slope. Perhaps if Colorado determines it doesn't want Trump on the ballot because of his actions, it's a possibility that other states could find other justifications for taking other folks, including Biden, off of their ballots if they see it as politically motivated. No one wants to go down that road.
Yep. I think some were surprised. And maybe I was a bit surprised. I'm not sure how I feel about this. Still processing it. But as I mentioned a moment ago, though, you saw justices from both sides of the aisle, as it were. Yeah. As we keep saying the court is not political. Everybody knows that's a lie. but it just is what it is. But justices appointed by Democrats and Republicans. Let me put it the safe way. Justices appointed by Democrats and Republicans again ask questions that seem to speak to their skepticism. Did that part surprise you?
A little bit. I mean, I think one thing that's clear is that some of the justices on the right-wing part of the court have been more open in their partisan affiliation, or partisan leanings, I should say, leanings, not affiliation, than some of the liberal justices. Though, as you say, at this point, there's not really much. No, everyone understands it's a fairly political body, the Supreme Court. I think what you saw, though, is overall part of a posture where folks on both sides seem highly unwilling to, or what they don't want to do is be seen as determining the presidential election. They saw what happened in 2000 when they were, in the middle of determining that presidential election. And even though everyone on the court, all the justices obviously understand that everyone sees them as political now, they're still bending over backwards to try not to be seen that way, even though, again, we understand that that's just a fig leaf.
Yep. When we come forward, that's the issue of whether you should be kicked off of state ballots. It appears to every one of us who've been following this and covering it that the Supreme Court is not going to support Colorado, Maine, or anybody else that wants to kick Donald Trump off the ballot. You heard Gabriel say a moment ago they don't want to be seen, as the court was back in 2000, deciding a presidential race. And so I think you can pretty much expect that when that decision does come, whenever it is going to come, that Donald Trump will be on all 50 ballots in all the states. That's my sense of it. That's Gabriel's sense. We could be wrong, but I doubt it. We come forward. We'll talk about the other issue the court is looking at. You recall last week on this program we discussed the decision by the federal appellate court that Donald Trump does not have immunity from prosecution regarding January the 6th. That lower court gave him until today to file his appeal, as it were, to the Supreme Court so that they can take this case up. And we don't know whether they will or not, but the lower court gave Donald Trump until today to make that actual filing. We'll talk about that and a great deal more when we come forward in this first hour with our guest, Gabriel Benedetti, that is, on Tavis Smiley.
Interrogating and unpacking. That's what we do around here. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton. And I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With Venture X, earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy and turn everyday purchases into extraordinary trips. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges where you just check in and chill out. Open up a world of possibilities with Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
City of Los Angeles landlords that own rent-controlled properties, you are now able to increase rents by 4% for your rent-controlled properties. An extra 1% per utility up to 6% can be added only if you pay the entire gas and electric bill. And don't forget to give your tenant an advance 30-day written notice for rent increases of less than 10%. It is state law. Learn more about the rent increase at housing.lacity.org. That's housing.lacity.org. KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of this light of ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This light of ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This light of ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
More of Tavis Smiley and Gabriel Debinetti, who is the New York Magazine national correspondent and author of the book, The Long Alliance. We'll talk about that text later in this hour. But we were just talking, in case you tuned in just now, we were just talking about the Supreme Court and their skepticism, their apparent skepticism last week when they were hearing oral arguments about whether or not Donald Trump should be kicked off any state ballots, namely Colorado. But there's also Maine and others who would like to do that if they could get away with it. But again, our sense is, our being Gabriel and Tavis and others, our sense is that's not going to happen. The court, again, Democrat-appointed judges, Republican-appointed judges, justices, both sides had questions that, again, appeared to underscore their skepticism about that argument. So my sense is that Donald Trump will be on all 50 ballots in all these states, assuming that he is the presumptive Republican nominee, and I don't see anything that's going to stop that at the moment. So that's one issue that the court is going to take up, has already taken up, again, here in oral arguments last week, a decision forthcoming in that regard. The other issue that they're going to have to deal with is the issue of whether or not Donald Trump does, in fact, have immunity from prosecution for his role in the January 6th insurrection. Let me just set this up by reading 3 or 4 paragraphs from the New York Times. This story just out a few moments ago. Former President Donald J. Trump is expected to file a last-ditch effort today, Monday, in the Supreme Court to press his claim of total immunity from criminal prosecution when a federal appeals court last week rejected the claim. It temporarily paused its ruling. So they said he doesn't have immunity, but they temporarily paused their ruling, saying, I read again, that it would return the case to the trial court on Monday, today, allowing Judge Tanya S. Chutkan, that's the black sister, the black judge in all these trials that Donald Trump is facing, allowing her to restart the proceedings in her case that have been frozen so far during the appeal. But the appeals court added that it would extend the pause until the Supreme Court rules. If Mr. Trump asked the justices to intervene by filling an application for a stay with them by Monday, that makes it virtually certain that Donald Trump will, in fact, file such an application in the coming hours today, meaning that the Supreme Court will soon be poised to determine whether and how fast in his federal trial on charges that he tried to subvert the election in 2020 will proceed. It has several options. The court has several options. Let me give them to you. Number one, it could deny a stay, which would restart the trial immediately. It could grant a brief stay and then deny a petition seeking review, which would effectively reject Trump's immunity argument and let the appeals court ruling stand. And again, the trial would move forward. Or it could hear his appeal on a fast track, as it is doing in a separate case on his eligibility to hold office. That's the case we just talked about. Or it could hear the case on the usual schedule, which would most likely delay any trial past the election. So there's a setup that gives you a sense of what the case is about, what the options are that the U.S. Supreme Court, I just gave you 4 options they have, once Donald Trump, as expected, files this appeal, these documents for stay later today. That's the frame. What say you, Gabrielle Debinetti?
Yeah, well, obviously we don't know what the justices are going to do, but as you said, Trump is expected to file this motion. It does seem entirely likely that the justices and the judicial system overall, let me back up for a second. This idea that he has immunity has been rejected over and over again, and I think most people, most legal analysts, would be skeptical of the idea that the Supreme Court would lean in any other way, even though, as we've said, it can be a pretty partisan body, leaning heavily towards Republicans or to the right wing. That said, we know that the justice system overall, multiple courts have seemed to suggest that they do want to get a lot of these legal issues with Trump out of the way as quickly as possible, one way or the other. They don't seem to want to drag these on, even though some judges have seemed to say, well, we're going to take all the time that we need on this. So it does seem that the least likely option is that the court would pick this up, but only in its usual schedule, which would ultimately seem that it would – what would be the effect there is likely that the trial that Trump is part of would only take place after the election, which of course would mean that we could have a president who is on trial if he is in fact elected this November. So it does – I don't want to predict exactly what's likely here, but it seems like we're going to get a fairly quick resolution to this, or at least in the coming months we're going to know. And again, over and over, the idea that Trump has immunity has been rejected by, legal scholars, judges, and the like.
Yep. So that if any one of those options that they have, they choose, which results in this trial restarting sooner than later, then we could, in fact, have a verdict before November. All the polls, all the studies, all the surveys, you follow this stuff as closely or better than I do. Every poll, study, and survey suggests that even though people are concerned about Biden's chances at re-election, we'll talk about that in this hour. There's some new data out about that. And, of course, we all saw his flub last week when he hastily called this press conference to tell us that his mind was sharp, and he made another mistake while he was trying to tell us that his mind was sharp. We'll come to that decision, which I think was a bad decision to do the press conference in the first place. We'll talk about that in a moment. But every poll, study, and survey I've read suggests that even those persons who are skeptical of his chances to get reelected say in those same polls that if, though, Donald Trump is found guilty of these cases, in these charges, if he's convicted, it changes their view about whether or not he ought to be eligible to be president if he is convicted of something. So I guess the question is, and none of us has a crystal ball, but what do you think the chances are that this trial does get restarted in time for there to be a verdict before Election Day?
Yeah, obviously we don't know, and there are, in fact, a number of trials that Trump is part of that could, be part of this mix here. But this does seem to be the big one. This question over the, his actions in trying to overthrow the 2020 election. It does seem, I think, more likely than not that we are going to see this case continue in the coming months. But it's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly when we're going to get a verdict out of it. But I think most folks that I've spoken with in the political and legal worlds do think that this is the most likely one to be. It's likely that we will see some movement on this in the next few months, definitely.
Yep, and again, if Gabriel's right and those experts are right, that we see movement on this in the next few months, that the court doesn't delay this thing by putting it on their typical calendar. They don't kick the can down the road, so to speak. If they don't do that, this trial will proceed. There will be a verdict. If that verdict is guilty, it fundamentally changes people's views about whether or not he is equipped to be president of these United States. So we shall see. But those are two major cases. We'll talk more about this again in our third hour. But I just want to get Gabriel's thoughts about that here at the start of the first hour. But those are two major cases that the court is looking at as we speak. Certainly we'll be looking at the second one later today. It could happen any minute now. Once Donald Trump and his legal team file that brief, those documents with the Supreme Court asking for this stay, we shall see. So let me circle back to Joe Biden since we're kind of already there anyway. So this is old news at this point, but it's really not old news because this story has legs, as you well know. And that is the drama that happened last week, late in the week, that we just get a chance to talk about today here on Monday. So the report comes out about Joe Biden in these documents, and the report finds, the investigator finds, special prosecutor finds, that Joe Biden ought not be prosecuted in his documents scandal. We all know that Donald Trump has his scandal with documents down at Mar-a-Lago, and that's what he's being tried for right now. But a decision was made in this investigation that Joe Biden didn't do anything that would lead to his being prosecuted. But in that report, that one sentence that he was an elderly man who had a bad memory, that one line resonated way more than the decision not to prosecute him. I don't think anybody expected that he was going to be prosecuted. But that line about his being elderly and having a poor memory has resonated like nobody's business. The president immediately, his team called a press conference to refute that because they know the political damage that's going to come from that one line in that report. Let me start with this, Gabriel. I thought it was a huge mistake, not just because he then flubbed and made a major misstatement while trying to convince us that he was, in fact, sharp. That's not even my issue. My issue is, why did the White House feel the need so immediately to jump on this and run the risk of something just like that happening? I think it was a mistake to jump as swiftly as they did and get in that defensive mode. I think it was a mistake. That's my read. What's your read?
Yeah, I've heard that exact take from a lot of people this weekend. I think I'll tell you my read on what they were thinking
right.
at the moment. There's been a lot of talk about Biden's age. This has been a thing that's been bubbling up for a very long time, whether or not you believe that he is in fact this feeble old man with a bad memory, as the special prosecutor said. The reality is that clearly there was a calculus within and around the White House and the campaign after this report was released that, in fact, this was going to be a political problem for them. This is not a White House that tends to do things just out of quick reactions. It's very unlike them to have the president go out unprompted or unscripted and just answer some questions like that. But what you saw in his statement was that he was furious. He is really tired of people questioning his mental acuity. And the reality is here, because like he always says, I'm going to quote Biden here, he constantly is saying, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And whether or not you believe that he is up to the job of being president, as he sees it, and as certainly a lot of the people around him see it, it's not even a real question. First, he's doing a good job in their eyes of being president. But second, this is all political in their mind. They think this is a political hit from a right-wing prosecutor, from a conservative prosecutor, and also that people should not be thinking about Biden in a vacuum. They should be thinking about him compared to Trump. And that's a case that Biden tried to make over and over, that, no matter what you think of him, he's better than Trump. He's more with it than Trump. He's less extreme than Trump. So that's, I think, the political context within which you see them rolling the president out, and you see him speaking pretty angrily in front of the cameras on Thursday night last week. He did, obviously, as you said, make that mistake, and it was not ultimately the most damaging political mistake ever, but clearly by making any sort of factual error, especially on a matter of foreign policy, he is in a situation now where he's going to be even given more questions on this. Yeah. And there's a bigger question now about what sort of campaigning he's going to do in the coming year. That said, again, they believe, people around Biden believe, that at the end of the day, this is not going to be the central issue of the campaign, because voters will come to understand that Biden is with it. He may be slower. He may be certainly is older. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's no contest in terms of who would you rather have running the country, a slower Joe Biden or Donald Trump in his full effect. And you saw him, leaning into that himself by making his statements about NATO that we can talk about that did end up dominating the news this weekend, whereas Biden didn't.
A few things in that regard before we move forward here. Number one, I want to make a comparison, and you probably know where I'm going already as a national correspondent for New York Magazine, but I want to make a comparison to James Comey and the damage he did to Hillary Clinton in a moment here. Again, I figure you already know I'm going there. But let me just ask you this. There's so many examples I could give where Joe Biden Biden's message isn't resonating. He's done a pretty good job of stewarding the economy. The economy's slowly bouncing back. He pulled the country back from the brink. He's restored our national standing, international standing around the globe. I could list a number of things, and I'm a progressive. Joe Biden is not progressive enough for me, and yet I think he's done a fair to good job of managing the crisis that he inherited post-Donald Trump. I think it's hard to argue that. Having said that, so much of his message does not resonate. That is a great line. Compare me not to the Almighty, but to the alternative. Don't compare me to the Almighty. Compare me to the alternative. It's a great line. Why is that line not working?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it has something to do with bigger questions about the media environment and how hard it is to actually get a message across in today's politics. But it also just has to do with the reality that he has never been a particularly strong communicator. Biden has never been known to be like a soaring speech giver or anything like that. Even back when he was a senator, he was respected for other things, but never for the way that he communicated and got his message across. But I think the final thing, and this is a point that I hear over and over from Democrats, but in particular from people close to the White House and to the Biden operation, is that a lot of voters, real people that are, they understand that there's an election going on, but they simply have other things going on in their lives, are not really clicked into the idea here that this is a binary choice between Biden and Trump. I hear it every day from people who are interested in politics, but don't really believe that ultimately Biden and Trump are going to be their options. Well, they are. And of course, when people seem to understand that, when they take in the full gravity of the situation, people are going to, and this is the Biden view, I'm not endorsing this necessarily, this is the Biden view, but they're going to look at things differently. They're going to say, well, Trump is simply unacceptable, so it doesn't matter what Biden's message is, as long as the message is at the end of the day, I'm not Trump. But the question of why he hasn't been able to get his own message through is one that bedevils people in the White House every single day. And they think it has something to do with the modern media environment, the way people have tuned out of politics in the post-Trump era. And there's not a lot of introspection, honestly, about the idea that Biden himself is not the best communicator and has never been.
Well, when you hastily call a press conference to show us how sharp your memory is and how on point you are, and you confuse the president of Egypt with the president of Mexico in that moment, that's a real problem. And again, we all make mistakes. I do it all the time. I've done it twice already in this program in 30 minutes. I've fumbled twice already, and I'm nowhere near 81. And so it happens to the best of us. And yet, to my point with Gabriel, that line of comparing him to the alternative and not the Almighty does not work. And I think in some ways it's unfair to the president, but I digress on that for now. When we come forward, I'm not done with this quite yet. I want to make this comparison to the damage that this special prosecutor did to Joe Biden with one sentence and what James Comey did. Remember James Comey back in the day with Hillary Clinton? The good news for Joe Biden is that it happens early enough where he can get this behind him. If he doesn't keep making mistakes, that is, he can get this behind him. James Comey's one line, his sentence about Hillary was so damning so late in the campaign that she could not rebound from that. What's up with these special prosecutors who feel the need to put these sentences in their reports? As far as I'm concerned, that sentence had no place in the report. That's not a defense of Joe Biden. Why do you have to say he's an old man with a bad memory? That has nothing to do with the job you were tasked with should he be prosecuted for the documents. So it does feel like a political hit. I digress on that for now. A great deal more to talk about with Gabrielle Debinetti when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
For all the freedom-loving folk, this is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like freedom.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Ray Harris, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A magnitude 4.8 earthquake struck northwest El Centro, California overnight. Secretary of Defense African-American Lloyd Austin is back in the hospital for an apparent bladder issue. Austin was hospitalized last month for an infection related to surgery for prostate cancer. The incident sparked controversy after it was found that Austin did not reveal his diagnosis of prostate cancer until almost a month after it was discovered. The memorial service for Dexter Scott King was held in Atlanta, Georgia over the weekend. The third of Coretta and Martin Luther King Jr.'s 4 children died January 27th following a battle with prostate cancer. King's family says his body was cremated to honor his wishes. And that's the latest. I'm Ray Harris on your home for 24/7 News, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Why are people saying "Hew yeah" to Jackson Hewitt? When you switch to Jackson Hewitt, they will beat what you paid last year on tax prep, even if you filed online. Proof of prior year payment required when filing. New clients only at participating locations through April 7th. Terms at jacksonhewitt.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
It might be time to put Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes in the GOAT conversation. Mahomes is only 28, and he's won 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years. He also has 3 Super Bowl MVP awards. Only 2 other quarterbacks have 3, Joe Montana and Tom Brady. Brady ended up with 5 Super Bowl MVPs before he shut it down. The game of the night in the NBA is tonight at Crypto.com Arena. The Clippers are hosting Minnesota. The Clippers and Minnesota are separated by only a half game at the top of the Western Conference. Tip-off time tonight is 7:30. The Lakers are off until Tuesday when they play Detroit. An easy day for the UCLA women's basketball team. The 10th-ranked Bruins beat Arizona State Sunday by 33 at Pauley Pavilion. Juju Watkins and USC's women's basketball team are home tonight against Arizona, 6 p.m. tip-off. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, home of the 2024 Climate Justice Campaign.
Looking for a career you'll love with flexibility, great pay, and benefits, and one of the country's top workplaces? Join the growing team at Progressive Insurance. Go to progressive.com/careers and apply online today.
We all agree that America has a very serious problem.
Okay, KBLA delegation, we need your help as we launch our 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. We would deeply appreciate you going to our KBLA 1580 website and filling out a short climate justice survey, which will help us better serve our beloved community as we build out this campaign. It'll take you just a few short minutes to complete the online survey, and the information you provide us will be invaluable as we do our part to hold folk accountable and amplify the voices of our people in this climate conversation. When you take the survey, you'll be automatically entered to win seats at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. So, hit our website at KBLA 1580. Help us out by taking the short Climate Justice Campaign survey, and you could be our guest at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. Thank you in advance for your consideration and cooperation. At KBLA Talk 1580, we care about the community, we care about the climate. We care about the climate.
I have a secret. I use Secret Whole Body Deodorant because more than just my armpits stink.
Oh, can I use it where my bra rubs under my...
Oh, yeah.
And what about down there? You know, my...
Totally. 4 out of 5 gynecologists would recommend it. So I tried it, and now I get 72 hours of freshness. From my pits to my...
Ooh, I love that it's a spray.
Me too. And it comes in sticks and creams too. Go get your Secret Whole Body Deodorant.
Did you know that feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't working at its best? Taking Metamucil every day can help. Metamucil fiber powders help promote your daily digestive health using a plant-based fiber called psyllium. The gelling action of this special fiber traps and removes waste so you can feel lighter and more energetic. Metamucil, promoting digestive health for a better you. Learn more at metamucil.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
More of Gabriel Debinetti coming your way right now. He is a New York Magazine national correspondent and author of the book The Long Alliance, about the bromance between Joe Biden and Barack Obama. We'll get to some of that before I lose him at the top of this hour. So I'm glad I got another half hour to unpack because there's more stuff to get to that we have not traversed as yet. Let me wrap up this conversation we were having a moment ago, Gabrielle, about this special prosecutor in that one line calling Joe Biden essentially feeble and old with a bad memory, and the way that one line resonated. The president and his team quickly called a press conference to show that he was up to the task, during which he summarily made another mistake by confusing the president of Egypt and the president of Mexico. So again, my view is that they should not have rushed to be on the defensive so quick. And they wouldn't have had that self-inflicted wound had they not moved as swiftly as they did, trying to show how sharp he really is. I digress on that point. The point I want to make now, though, Gabrielle, is that James Comey did the same thing to Hillary Clinton. One could argue that Hillary made a lot of mistakes in that campaign, and she did, including not going back to Michigan, where she should have been campaigning in the final days. They wrote that off, and she took a spanking in Michigan, and that in part led to her being defeated. So there were a number of mistakes that were made, no question about it. But that report from James Comey was damning for her, and it torpedoed that campaign, one could argue in retrospect, in a number of ways, allowing Donald Trump to go on and win. I say all that to ask, what is up with these special prosecutors, and why do they always feel the need to go above and beyond what they're basically being asked to do, and why aren't they more concerned and considerate about the politics of what they write? And here's the other question. At least this special prosecutor had the drama of James Comey in the rearview mirror. He could very well see and know that you write something in here that can be interpreted in any way that is political. It causes damage to the person that you are allegedly trying to clear. And that's why the White House, and I understand that I'm empathetic and sympathetic on this point, that's why they see that one line as a political hit from a conservative special prosecutor. It wasn't necessary, and James Comey proved that a few years ago. I'll shut up. What's your read?
Yeah, I mean, you draw a clear parallel here, and there's good reason for that. You know, I remember the Comey situation very well. I was much younger, I think, reporter covering the Clinton campaign for a number of years, and she was hit really hard by that. But the difference with that one was that Comey was the FBI director, and there was a big shock that he was, essentially making what was pretty clearly a political statement, that saying that she was irresponsible with her emails. And that investigation dragged on, and it kept, there were lots of drips throughout the campaign with various letters he was sending. So there were a lot of people who thought that since then the tide had really shifted and there needed to be a clearer understanding of the lack of partisanship needed in these investigations. But the difference was with this special prosecutor, Robert Hur, he is a Republican. He's not, he didn't come at this, he obviously came at this as the prosecutor, not from a clearly partisan angle. But you see a lot of people close to the White House now saying this was always going to be a partisan hit job. And, it's hard not to read part of this as political because, of course, the top line headline was that Biden was cleared.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do, he's not being charged with anything. And there are parallels to the Trump case, where Trump is being currently, investigated and on trial for his willful, hiding and taking of classified information, which Biden was absolved of doing. So, there's a reason to believe that even when, Biden was essentially cleared in some senses, or at least in the narrowest legal sense here, he was still given a political slap on the wrist, which many people were saying, including close to the White House, this is simply not the role of a prosecutor, and I think there's something to that.
No, I agree. That's not his role. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was writing, and he knew he ain't stupid. If he was stupid, he wouldn't be special prosecutor. He knew exactly what he was doing, and I think the Biden team doesn't need me to defend them. But it was a hit. That sentence simply was absolutely not necessary, and he's done exactly what he intended to do. Let me ask a question, because you raised Trump's name earlier. We are told by our friends on the right that there has been, is now, and probably will be for a long time in the future, if you ask them, this so-called liberal media bias. There's a liberal media bias that we are told exists. Rush Limbaugh and I were talking one time many years ago, and there wasn't much, of course, that Rush Limbaugh ever said that I agreed with or liked. But at one point we were having a conversation, And I asked him, I said, Rush, why don't you ever have, I was just chiding him. I said, why don't you ever have any guests on your program? Why don't you ever have anybody come on and offer a different point of view? Why won't you engage in some robust debate on your show? I was needling him about why he always would spend 3 or 4 hours a day just bloviating, talking all by himself. And he said, Tavis, that's a very good question. You know what the answer is? I said, what, Rush? He said, I am equal time. And I fell out laughing. It was a great line. I am equal time. So that's his response to this whole notion of this so-called liberal media bias. Here's my question. If, in fact, there is a liberal media bias, why are we always focusing on Biden's slip-ups but not on Trump's slip-ups? He's done the same thing. He's doing it more and more often. If there's a liberal media bias, why the focus on Biden and we ignore Trump? Gabriel Benedetti?
Yeah, I think the question of a liberal media bias has so many different dimensions at this point, but Trump is what really, over the last 10 years now really has made clear that it's not simply a question of left versus right. Trump has really challenged a lot of the ways that the political media in particular thinks about its role. And one of the things that he has done is just so overwhelmed, so many newsrooms, so many ways that we have thought about our job for such a long time now, with the sheer volume of shock and awe and surprising, controversial statements, outright, bigotry sometimes that we don't really know. And I'm using the royal we here. I don't want to just talk about myself, but, newsrooms often struggle to really tell what is newsworthy and what is new. So you saw from the Biden operation, from the White House in the last few weeks, from the campaign in particular, people saying you can't just talk about how Biden's old and not mention that Trump is essentially the same age, just a little bit younger, and very clearly, has not, doesn't really string two sentences together in the same way, that he's slowing down, and then you have him saying all sorts of truly dramatic things. He said this thing about encouraging Russia to attack NATO countries that aren't paying their fair share of dues to NATO. That's not how that works. Now you see, I think, reporters sort of saying, well, now Trump is fully back. It's what you're seeing, honestly, and this is not an excuse, it's an honest truth, is you're seeing newsrooms work out in real time what is news and what people totally tune out. And, the reality is that a lot of people have totally tuned out of political news since Trump came to power or came to prominence in 2015 or so, in part because it's just so overwhelming, the sheer volume, the sheer amount of stuff that he's putting out there that would be totally shocking coming from anyone else. Yeah. So in some respects, there was a thought in a lot of places, in a lot of corners, in Washington in particular, well, with Biden, it's a return to normalcy. We can cover him like a normal president. The problem with that is that we're not in a normal political environment in total. And so I'm not against the idea at all of covering Biden like a normal president, but there has to be an acknowledgement of the broader political context.
Yeah, I just think Donald Trump's getting a pass on all his flubs and slip-ups, and they're going in hard on the president. That's my read of it, but this audience knows I've been sick for a long time of the way the mainstream media covers the horse race. It doesn't address the issues, and oftentimes is not fair or balanced, pardon the pun, in its coverage. Our guest is Gabriel Benedetti, New York Magazine national correspondent, author of the book The Long Alliance, about the bromance between Joe Biden and Barack Obama. You heard Gabriel say earlier, use this phrase that many are using, that about this binary choice that we have between Biden and Trump. Well, there are many of us who don't necessarily see it as a binary choice. There are other candidates that are running. And if you saw the game yesterday, the big game, congratulations, Kansas City, you saw the big game, you saw the RFK commercial. He spent a lot of money on that commercial to make it clear that it ain't a binary choice. And I didn't expect that, but it was a bold move and not a bad commercial. Throwback to his uncle and his father. So if you saw the RFK commercial, we'll talk about that. It may not be a binary choice this time around. We'll talk about that and a bit more when we come forward. Gabriel Benedetti on Tavis Smiley.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
It's game day at Jim's house, and the spread is impressive.
Mike's already done some damage with the hot wings, and now he's dropping back and going deep for another slice of pizza.
I sure hope he brought the Pepto.
Mike knows that Pepto-Bismol provides fast 5-symptom relief from unexpected stomach upsets. He's no rookie.
The way he's throwing back those nachos, he's the GOAT.
Be ready for game day with Pepto-Bismol.
When you have nausea, heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, diarrhea.
Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, as the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black history. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
When I saw that commercial yesterday during the big game, Gabrielle Debinetti from RFK, it made it abundantly clear to me that he doesn't think that this race is a binary choice, sir.
Without a doubt. I mean, there are a number of other people who are running, and the question is not whether any of them can win, because I think it's pretty clear that unless something changes dramatically, they won't. But the question is, every presidential election in modern history is essentially determined on the margins. And if there are people who want to vote for RFK Jr., for example, in some of these swing states, that could have a very big effect on the ultimate outcome of this election.
There's RFK, there's Cornel West, there's Marianne Williamson, there's Jill Stein. There are enough people who are offering voters an alternative, to your point, that this could matter when it comes to the margins. Your sense of whether or not the frustration with, the one thing that's abundantly clear in all these polls and surveys and studies, again, is that people don't want this binary choice. Nobody wants a Donald Trump, Joe Biden rematch, and that's just incontrovertible. The data is abundantly clear about that. Nobody wants that choice. And so when I read data that suggests time and time again that nobody wants to see this sequel, it makes me wonder, Gabrielle, whether or not many voters will in fact look to vote for an independent. And that was RFK's message in that commercial yesterday: vote independent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the question is, when you actually dig into what these independent people, candidates stand for, whether voters will really agree with them. He's not running on pure nostalgia. This is someone whose many of his views are pretty out of line with a lot of independent voters. And of course, it's incumbent on the main candidates, on Biden and Trump, but certainly on Biden primarily because his are the voters that seem more likely to go for independent, possibly. To make the case that essentially not voting for him is the same thing as voting for Trump, even if, in effect, you're voting for Kennedy or you're voting for West or you're voting for Jill Stein, or if No Labels, the centrist organization, puts someone out, whoever that would be. So that's the basic math. They're arguing, there are a number of people whose names you can put in, But at the end of the day, only two people can realistically win. So if you're not voting for me, you're voting for him.
Yep. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Gabriel Debinetti, I want to go into his book, The Long Alliance, and just ask him in short order what it is in his text that came out a year or two ago, but it's relevant in a variety of ways in this campaign because it tells us a lot about who Joe Biden is. I'm going to ask him what from that book we should be thinking about in this particular moment when it comes to understanding who Joe Biden really is, and one or two other things I may get to if I have enough time. You're listening to Gabriel Debinetti on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
What's up, LA? This is John McKinney, your next district attorney. Voting is underway, and public safety is the top issue on the ballot. As a deputy district attorney for over 25 years, I know Los Angeles, and I know how to keep this community safe. And as an African American who lives and works in this community, I know the unique challenges we face. My promise to you is to ensure accountability, protect victims' rights, and give the underserved a voice. I'm John McKinney, and I ask for your vote for LA County District Attorney.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment. LA's 99 neighborhood councils form the grassroots level of the Los Angeles city government. The system was created to connect LA's diverse communities to City Hall. While neighborhood council board members are volunteers, they are also public officials elected to office by the members of their community. Neighborhood councils advocate on issues like homelessness, housing, land use, emergency preparedness, public safety, parks, transportation, and sustainability. They also provide local expertise on the delivery of city services to their various communities. Neighborhood councils are open to participation by anyone who is a part of the fabric of daily life in said community. This includes those who live, work, or own property or a business. If you are interested in stepping up to join your local neighborhood council, visit www.empowerla.org. That's empowerla.org. It's time to think globally, but act locally. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're looking for the most epic place on Earth, let's start at the base of a massive waterfall. Then trek through the thick jungle. Then climb to the peak of a snowy mountaintop. Then once you get there, keep going. Because with intelligent 4x4 and 7 drive modes and a Nissan Pathfinder, the search is the real adventure.
Available feature. Intelligent 4x4 cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. Always monitor traffic and weather conditions.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
Gabriel Debinetti's book is called The Long Alliance, and it's a book that goes deeper, much deeper into this simplistic bromance notion, this narrative that's been out there for a long time about Biden and his friend Barack Obama. There is this prevailing narrative, and I keep saying it, this fantasy, if you will, Gabriel, this fantasy that many on the GOP side have, that Joe Biden ultimately will not be the nominee, that at some point the Democrats are going to come to their senses and they're going to, demand that he get kicked off, that he step aside. They're going to go to the White House and have a session with him and tell him it's time to step aside. That's the fantasy that they keep advancing in all these interviews and all kinds of places on the right. Take me inside your book and tell me what we should know about Joe Biden that makes it clear that ain't going to happen. He's played the long game for 50 years, man.
That's definitely not what's going to happen. Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. My book is about the very complicated relationship between Biden and Obama, which everyone knows is very close and is, in fact, as close as any relationship between president and vice president in modern history, and certainly between president and former president, as they are now. But I think one of the things that really I think people need to understand about Biden is, like you said, he's been doing this for a very, very long time. In the public eye, as, having been Obama's vice president. And that's true. But he had been a senator for nearly 40 years before that, had been in Washington for a very long time. They really have not always seen politics eye to eye. There were times when Obama didn't think that Biden should be running for president. In 2016, he convinced him not to. In 2020, he tried to convince him not to. And ultimately, Biden was proven right. And Biden now really does have a chip on his shoulder about that. But to your point, I think it's important to note that Biden really now operates not as if he's running the Democratic Party, but as if he's channeling the Democratic Party. And in that sense, he still has Obama's influence in his ears, and he's going to be relying a lot, not only on Obama, but on the entire overall Democratic infrastructure. Lots of senators and governors are going to be out there campaigning for him, but also former presidents like Bill Clinton. And when it comes to the Obamas themselves, part of this right-wing fantasy is that Biden's going to be replacing the ticket with Michelle Obama. Now, let me say, the former First Lady is absolutely not going to run for president. She hates politics.
Yeah.
It's just completely made up. But I think you'll absolutely start to see Obama himself play a bigger and bigger role, as he did in the 2020 election, by the way, as this campaign goes on. A lot of the people surrounding Biden, a lot of people running his campaign do come from Obama world. And while Biden himself has been playing this long game for a very, very long time, understands how politics works, and is a survivor, there's a lot to be said about the fact that he did learn about modern politics, at the side of Barack Obama. They do, in some respect, see the challenge facing the country right now in the same way.
Yep. I got 60 seconds here. I want to close kind of where we were earlier in this conversation, and that is, speaking of Joe Biden, whether or not this hit that he just took from the special prosecutor, calling him basically feeble, old, and with a bad memory, do you agree, do you think that it happened at least early enough in the campaign where if they manage it properly, it will not be an issue on Election Day?
I think it's highly unlikely that this specific report is going to be an issue on Election Day. The question of Biden's age was always going to be a big issue. The question is now just how he proves to people like he's still got it, that he's still vigorous. He's going to be out there campaigning. I think there's a real debate going on in Democratic circles about what exactly that should look like now.
His name is Gabriel Debinetti. He is the national correspondent for New York Magazine and author of the book The Long Alliance, about the relationship between Joe Biden and Barack Obama. Gabriel, good to have you on this program. I deeply appreciate your insights. We'll have you back on, I hope, between now and Election Day a few times. There's a lot to talk about this year, and I love doing it with you. Thank you for your time, sir. All the best to you.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you on. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Ray Harris, and here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A magnitude 4.8 earthquake struck northwest El Centro, California overnight. Secretary of Defense African-American Lloyd Austin is back in the hospital for an apparent